The call came at 6:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been awake since 4, lying on top of the covers in my apartment, staring at the water stain on my ceiling that looked like a hand reaching for something just out of frame. I'd gotten used to not sleeping well. 3 years of not sleeping well will do that to you. I almost didn't answer. The number was from a hospital 2 states away, and for a second I thought it was a mistake, a wrong number, something that had nothing to do with me. Then I remembered I had 2 daughters. I answered. My name is Ren. I'm 31 years old. I work as a physical therapist at a small outpatient clinic, and I drive a 10-year-old Subaru with a cracked rear bumper that I keep meaning to fix. None of that matters, except to say that I am ordinary. I am not dramatic. I do not have a story that should ever have turned into the story I'm about to tell you, but here it is anyway. I met my ex-husband when I was 24. His name was Corbin. I want to be careful about how I describe him because the easy thing to do now, knowing what I know, is to say I always knew something was wrong. I didn't. He was funny and certain of himself and made me feel, for the first time in my life, like someone was genuinely paying attention to me. When Corbin looked at you, you felt seen. That was his gift. I didn't understand until much later that the same quality that made him magnetic also made him dangerous. We got engaged after 18 months. I was 26. My mother cried at the restaurant when he proposed, the good kind of crying, and my younger sister took 17 photos of my hand. I was 8 weeks pregnant at the wedding. We hadn't planned it, but we were happy. Or I was happy. I believe now that Corbin's version of happiness has always been more conditional than mine. The twins were born 7 months after the wedding, 2 girls. We named them Ivy and Prue. Ivy came out first, furious and red-faced, screaming before the doctor even finished. Prue came 40 seconds later, quieter, eyes already open like she was trying to take stock of the situation. I remember thinking that they were already entirely themselves, already 2 completely different people, and that I had no idea yet who those people were going to be. I was 32 hours into labor. I was exhausted in a way I had no vocabulary for, and I was happier than I had ever been in my life. The marriage started fracturing about a year in. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this part because it's the part I understand the least, even now. I've replayed it so many times that the memories feel worn thin, like a photograph handled too many times. What I know is this. Corbin became controlling in the quiet way that controlling people operate. Not all at once, but gradually, rearranging your life in small increments until one day you look around and nothing is where you left it. He didn't like my friends. He had opinions about how I dressed. He managed the money in a way that always left me asking him for things instead of just having them. When I tried to talk about any of this, he was reasonable. He had explanations. He was very good at explanations. I tried to leave twice before I actually left. Both times I came back because we had the twins and because he was very good at the version of himself he showed me when I threatened to go. The third time I didn't come back. Ivy and Prue were 4 years old. I moved into a furnished apartment 20 minutes away from the house we'd shared, with 2 suitcases and a box of the girls' drawings that Corbin had been keeping on the fridge. I took those drawings specifically. I don't know why. I just knew I needed to have them. I want to tell you that the custody process was difficult but fair. It wasn't. Corbin had a lawyer I didn't know he'd been preparing for months. He had documentation I didn't know he'd been building. Emails taken out of context, a letter from a therapist I'd seen briefly during our marriage who had since retired, testimony from 2 of his family members who had never liked me. He told the court I was emotionally unstable. He told the court I had a drinking problem. I have never had a drinking problem. I had 3 glasses of wine at my own bachelorette party and fell asleep at 10 o'clock. That is the extent of my relationship with alcohol. None of that mattered. The judge awarded him primary custody. I was given supervised visitation, 2 hours, every other Saturday at a family services center that smelled like industrial cleaner and sadness. I appealed. I hired a different lawyer. I filed motions and affidavits and drove 3 hours to attend hearings that got rescheduled and rescheduled again. I did everything I was supposed to do. And then Corbin was relocated for work, or so he said, to a city 9 hours away. And somehow in the machinery of the legal system, that became a reason to suspend my visitation while the new jurisdiction was established. Temporarily, they said. Temporarily, Lace did. Temporary lasted 3 years. 3 years. Ivy and Prue were 4 when I last held them. They were 7 when I stopped being able to picture their faces clearly without looking at photographs. I had photographs. I printed them and put them on my refrigerator in the same spots where their drawings used to be. I wrote letters that I don't know if they ever received. I sent birthday cards with small things inside, a pressed flower, a sticker sheet, a little note that said, "I love you every single day and I am always, always thinking of you." Corbin told the court I had sent inappropriate materials. He told them I was attempting to alienate the children from their current stable environment. A judge I never met in a state I'd visited once on a road trip agreed with him. I stopped sleeping at 4 a.m. I got very good at mornings. The call at 6:47 was from a woman named Dr. Fairchild. She was a pediatric oncologist. She told me that my daughter Prue had been diagnosed with leukemia 6 weeks earlier. She told me that Prue's treatment wasn't responding the way they'd hoped and that they were evaluating whether a bone marrow transplant might be necessary. She told me that the most likely compatible donors would be close biological relatives. "We've tested the father," she said carefully. "He's not a match." I sat up in bed. "Okay," I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere further away than my own throat. "We'd like to test you as soon as possible, Ms. Wren." She paused. "Is there anything you need to know before we proceed?" I said no. I booked a flight for the next morning. I sat on the floor of my apartment for an hour after I hung up, and then I stood up because Prue needed me to stand up, and I packed a bag. The hospital was large and clean and full of a particular kind of quiet that hospitals have. Not silence, but everything muted, like sound traveling through water. I checked in at the front desk and a nurse walked me back through corridors that all looked the same to me. I didn't know what I was going to feel when I saw the girls. I had tried to prepare myself. I had not been able to prepare myself. Ivy was sitting in a chair next to Prue's bed, reading something on a tablet. She looked up when I walked in. For a moment, nothing happened. She just looked at me with Corbin's gray eyes and my mother's mouth and her own expression, which I didn't recognize yet, which belonged entirely to her. Then she said, "Mom," not a question, just a word, just a fact. I crossed the room and I held her for a long time and I didn't say anything because there was nothing to say that wouldn't have taken hours. Prue was sleeping. She looked smaller than I remembered. Children are supposed to get bigger while you're not looking. That's the natural direction of things. Prue looked like something had been taken from her. I stood next to her bed and put my hand over hers and just stayed there. Corbin arrived an hour later. I had been dreading this part. I had run through it in my mind 100 times on the flight over, rehearsing what I would say, deciding I would be calm, deciding I would not let him see anything that he could use. He walked in and stopped when he saw me. Something moved across his face, not surprise exactly, more like recalculation. The look of a man adjusting his strategy. "Wren," he said. "Corbin," I said. That was all for a while. Dr. Fairchild came in 20 minutes later with a colleague, a man she introduced as Dr. Osei. They had Prue's latest results. They had the bone marrow typing from Corbin's test. They sat down and explained everything in the careful, measured way that doctors explain things when the news is complicated and the room is already tense. Corbin wasn't a match. Not even close. The typing was so far off that Dr. Osei, choosing his words with visible care, said that while they would still want to test me, there was something else they needed to address first. Corbin looked at him. "What does that mean?" Dr. Osei set down the folder he was holding. He looked at Dr. Osei, set down the folder he was holding. He looked at Dr. Othokow, Fairchild. Then he looked back at Corbin. "Mr. Corbin," he said. That's how he said it, with the last name. Formal. "The bone marrow typing we ran also includes genetic markers that give us information beyond compatibility. I want to be straightforward with you." He folded his hands on the table. "These results indicate that you are not Prue's biological father." The room was very quiet. Corbin said, "That's not possible." "Doctor," Osei said, "I understand this is difficult to hear." Corbin said, "Run it again." They ran it again. I gave my sample that afternoon. I sat in a small room with a nurse who was very kind and didn't ask me anything personal, and I answered the questions on the intake form. And I thought about Prue's hand under mine, the way she'd been sleeping, the blue light coming through the hospital blinds. The results came back in 48 hours. I was a strong potential match. Not guaranteed. The full compatibility workup would take longer, but strong. I was also, according to the same genetic panel, Prue's biological mother, which should not have been in question. But Corbin had told the girls. I found this out gradually, through Ivy, through careful conversations over the following days, that I had left. Not that I had been legally prevented from seeing them, that I had chosen to go, that I had decided I didn't want to be part of their lives. Ivy was 7. She'd been told this at 4 and had spent 3 years carrying it. I found out about this while sitting in a hospital cafeteria at 10 o'clock at night, eating a sandwich I didn't taste, while Ivy sat across from me and said, very quietly, that she'd always wondered what she'd done wrong. I put down the sandwich. "You didn't do anything," I said. "You didn't do a single thing wrong. Not one." She looked at me with those gray eyes. "Then why did you leave?" "I didn't," I said. "I want to explain everything to you, all of it. But I need you to know first, I never left. I tried to get back to you every single day for 3 years. There is a folder in my apartment with every letter I wrote, every court filing, every receipt from every flight I took to hearings that got canceled. I have a box of return birthday cards. I kept everything. And when you're ready, I will show you all of it." She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Okay." The financial piece came out slowly, the way these things do, through lawyers and court filings and one conversation I wasn't supposed to overhear between Dr. Time, Fairchild, and a hospital administrator in the hallway outside Prue's room. Prue had been sick for 6 weeks before I was called. In those 6 weeks, Corbin had started a fundraiser, online through one of those medical crowdfunding platforms, with photos of Prue in her hospital bed, photos I had not consented to, photos taken without my knowledge, and a description of a single father doing everything he can for his little girl. The fundraiser had raised, at the point I found out, just over $40,000. Prue's insurance covered most of her treatment. I checked. I called the billing department and asked, specifically, what portion of Prue's care had required out-of-pocket payment. $1,100. $40,000 raised. $1,100 spent on its stated purpose. I sat with that number for a long time. I'm not going to tell you that what happened next was fast or easy or satisfying in the way that justice is satisfying in movies. It wasn't. It was paperwork and phone calls and a family attorney named Ms. Burnell, who was methodical and unimpressed by drama, and exactly what I needed. It was a forensic accountant. It was a meeting with the state attorney's office that lasted 4 hours and left me with a headache that didn't go away for 2 days. What I will tell you is that Corbin was investigated, that the investigation expanded, that the original custody case was reviewed in light of what the investigation turned up, which included not just the fundraiser but evidence that several of the documents used to support his original custody filing had been manipulated. I will tell you that I was granted emergency temporary custody of Ivy and Prue on a Tuesday afternoon in November, standing in a courthouse hallway with Ms. Burnell while Prue was still inpatient and Ivy was with my sister in a hotel room nearby. I will tell you that I cried in the hallway, and Ms. Burnell handed me a travel pack of tissues from her briefcase without comment, which I appreciated enormously. Prue's transplant was approved 4 weeks later. The full compatibility workup confirmed I was a match. I want to describe what it was like to lie in that hospital bed, tubes in my arm, knowing that something of me was going to help her, that my body, which had grown her, was going to help keep her here. But I don't have the words for it that feel adequate. I just know that I would have done it 1,000 times over. I would have done it without the 3 years of loss preceding it, without the vindication, without any of it. She is my daughter. That has never been a complicated sentence for me, even when everything else was. There is a bench outside the hospital where Ivy and I ate lunch sometimes during the weeks Prue was recovering. It was an unremarkable bench, metal, slightly cold even in the afternoon sun. Ivy liked it because you could see a small courtyard garden from there, and there was a bird that kept coming back. Some kind of sparrow, she thought, though neither of us knew enough about birds to be certain. We talked about a lot of things on that bench. About the years I'd missed. About the stories Corbin had told them. and the things she'd believed, and the things she'd quietly not believed because they didn't quite fit the person she half remembered. She told me she used to look at the birthday cards before he could intercept them. She'd gotten to 2 of them. She'd kept them folded up inside a book she brought from home. She got out her phone and showed me a photo of the cards. She'd photographed them before the book was taken away, a school bag check, something like that. She wasn't entirely clear on the details, but she had the photos. "I knew you were real," she said. Not dramatically, just as a fact. Like, I knew you were actually out there. Some part of me just knew. The sparrow landed on the edge of the courtyard planter. We watched it for a while. "I'm real," I said. "I'm staying real." Prue was discharged on a Thursday morning. She walked out of the hospital in a yellow coat that my sister had bought her because Prue had said yellow was her favorite color, and my sister had gone immediately to 3 different stores until she found the right one. I was on her left side. Ivy was on her right. My sister was taking pictures from a few feet ahead, walking backward, almost tripping over a parking median. Corbin was not there. He was in a different process now, one that didn't involve hospital courtyards or yellow coats or any of us. Prue stopped at the top of the exit ramp and looked out at the parking lot and the gray sky and the bare trees at the edge of the lot, and she said, "Can we get food? I want a real meal." "The food here tastes like a building." Ivy said, "All food tastes like a building to you." Prue said, "That is true and also not relevant." I laughed. Fully, for the first time in a while, in a way that came from somewhere unclenched, we got food. I moved back. Not to the city we've lived in when I left. That wasn't possible yet, maybe not ever, but to the same region, 40 minutes away, close enough for school districts and doctors and the particular routines that children need, and that I was only beginning to learn about my own daughters. I'm still learning. There are years in them that I wasn't there for. Ivy has strong opinions about music that I don't understand yet. Prue has a way of going quiet when she's upset that took me months to recognize as upset and not just quiet. They have inside jokes I'm not part of, and references to TV shows I've never seen, and a whole private language between the 2 of them, the twin language, which I'm not sure I'll ever be entirely fluent in. That's fine. That's how it should be. They are not required to wait for me to catch up. They are not required to fill me in on everything. They are just required to be here, and they are here. And every morning when I drive them to school, I feel something that I can only describe as the opposite of that water stain on my ceiling. Something reaching, yes, but reaching towards something that's actually there. The fundraiser investigation resolved 18 months after Prue's discharge. I don't follow the legal details closely anymore. Ms. Burnell keeps me informed of what I need to know, and I have learned to let the rest of it sit outside my attention. What I know is this: the money was an issue. The documentation was an issue. The original custody case and its supporting materials became an issue. Things moved slowly, then faster, then to a conclusion I won't describe in full because my daughters may someday read this, and they deserve to decide for themselves how much of that story they want to carry. What I will say is that Corbin no longer has custody. What I will say is that the sparrow is back this spring, or one very much like it, in the same planter in the hospital courtyard. Ivy texted me a photo of it last week. She was there for a follow-up appointment with Prue, and she saw it and thought of our bench and took the picture. She sent it with no caption. I looked at it for a long time. Then I sent back a single heart, and she sent back a single heart, and that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. I've thought a lot about what actually undid Corbin. Not the investigation, not the lawyer, not the court filings. Those were consequences. What undid him was something simpler. He built everything on a foundation that required other people to never find out the truth. And the thing about that kind of foundation is that it doesn't fail gradually. It holds and holds and holds. And then one day a 7-year-old girl gets sick and a doctor runs a routine test and the whole thing comes down at once. That's not luck. That's not fate in any mystical sense. That's just the way deception actually works when you look at it closely. It requires constant maintenance. It requires controlling what people see, what they hear, what they remember. Corbin was good at that maintenance, genuinely good for years. But he was maintaining something that was always going to be fragile because it was built on things that weren't true. I used to think that the cruelest part of what happened to me was the time. 3 years. I will never get those years back. Ivy was 4 when I last held her, and she was 7 when she said my name like a fact she'd been carrying in her pocket. That gap doesn't close. I've had to make peace with that, and I won't pretend the peace came easily or completely. But I've stopped thinking of those 3 years as only loss. I had to. Not as a coping mechanism, genuinely. Because what I did during those 3 years was keep going. I filed the appeals. I drove to the hearings. I sent the birthday cards even when they came back. I kept the folder. I kept the receipts. I kept everything, not because I knew it would matter someday, but because stopping felt like agreeing with the story Corbin was telling about me. And I refused to agree with that story. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just quietly, persistently, in the way that ordinary people resist things they know are wrong, by continuing to act like the truth matters even when no one in power seems to be listening. That persistence is the thing I want to hold on to. Not anger, not vindication, though I felt that too. The persistence? Because Prue needed a donor and I was there. I was there because I never fully stopped trying to be there. And Ivy knew I was real because she'd felt, somewhere underneath everything she'd been told, that the person who sent birthday cards with pressed flowers inside them was not someone who had chosen to disappear. Children know things. They don't always have the words for what they know, but they carry it anyway, quietly, in the way Ivy carried those photograph cards inside her book. I think about that a lot, about what we transmit to the people we love, even when we can't reach them directly, about how integrity isn't just a private matter. It moves, it travels, it lands somewhere even when you can't see where it's going. I'm not the same person I was before any of this happened. I'm quieter in some ways and less patient in others. I've gotten very good at knowing which things are worth my energy and which things aren't. I know now that I can survive a version of my life I never would have chosen and come out the other side still myself, still someone my daughters can recognize as their mother. That's not nothing. That's actually everything.